to another episode of Gov Tech Today, where we aim to bridge the divide between .com and .gov. I'm your host, Jen Saha. We have a great, exciting guest today. Ben Rogers is the Chief Technology Officer at CAL FIRE. Ben, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Great. Well, thank you so much for having me. I just caught your podcast with Leanna, and it was fantastic. So I watched that this morning as preparation for this interview.
Good.
So yeah,
okay.
It was really
no
good.
No pressure.
Yeah, I know, right? It's hard act to follow. But yeah, again, thank you so much for having me on the show. Yeah, I'm the Chief Technology Officer at CAL FIRE. I've been at CAL FIRE for about 3 years. Prior to CAL FIRE, as you can probably tell, I'm not a native Californian, so I grew up in the United Kingdom.
Weird. No, really?
I don't have that Californian accent, not yet. Working on it. But I started my career at Accenture in the UK. I went into technology that way, and I've always been in government consulting. So I've always been on the private sector side. So I was at Accenture for a while, and that took me to some places. We worked on big transformation projects in the UK with Siebel at the time. Actually, I did a big Siebel implementations for the pension service. And then I joined a smaller startup working with an Oracle tool like Oracle Policy Automation, like business rules, a lot of policy analysis. I worked for a startup there. And then eventually, my life took me to the United States with the Affordable Care Act and all those implementations. My skills in business rules engines and Oracle Policy Automation seemed to be in demand in the United States because there was a lot of policy automation going on. So take Medicaid to the next level, to implement all those new rules at the state level. And that's what brought me to the state of Hawaii, of all places. So I worked for KPMG at the state of Hawaii for a while, doing the Medicaid. It was great. It sounds
it's totally
cool.
backwards.
Yeah,
normally everyone works for the state and then leaves and goes and works for one of those consulting firms.
It was funny because I always used to say that I always believed in public service, and I always knew that one day I would jump the fence, as it were, and I always tried to. Oh, my colleagues in the private sector were always like, "You're not a state worker. Like you have to think about
the state needs more state workers with that kind of experience and diverse backgrounds. Like I think it's awesome.
Yeah, it was definitely an interesting journey to here and ending up in California. So I was a director at KPMG for a while, and then I joined a local startup working in technology, and then this opportunity at CAL FIRE came up. And actually, what's interesting is that my family and I were seriously considering leaving California because of the fires, because of everything going on, like 2019, 2020. It was rough, in Sacramento, like the smoke. And, there were times where, you remember, it was like blanketed in smoke for months.
Totally. I do remember. Actually, I was pregnant at the time.
Oh, really?
And my husband was like, oh, this can't be good for the baby. So we actually went to Hawaii and stayed there for like 3 weeks to just get out of the smoke.
Yeah,
we
actually drove across the. It's funny, we drove. We had family in San Diego, so we drove. As soon as you crossed the Grapevine, the smoke disappeared.
Yeah.
So we did the same kind of thing. Like we went. So we seriously looked at it, and we looked all around, like where to move, and then I kind of flipped it on its head, and I was like, well, we love California. Like, what about maybe now is a time to try and be part of the solution? And this job at CAL FIRE came up. At the time, it was the Chief Innovation Officer, Scott Gregory at the time, the Deputy Director Gregory, just created this new initiative, new innovation team. And I was like, if I could have actually crafted a role for myself that I would most enjoy doing, it would have been that. So, some decisions were made, and I was like, why not? Let's give it a go. Let's be part of let's see what I could do. Let's be part of the solution and see what it's like being on the inside for a while. I've been on the outside, consulting, trying to be a good partner to my state coworkers, but then I was always wondering is the grass greener? What's it like on the other side, as it were?
So is it greener?
It's definitely, it's a whole different ball game, with being on the quote unquote inside. I mean, there's just so much more you have to think about. I mean, I think it gives me the opportunity to do more long lasting change, and I'm actually originally sort of was talking about, well, could I do this job maybe as a contractor for CAL FIRE? Is there ways that maybe we could do some innovation? And it was very clear to me that no, this is an embedded long-term, be part of the organization, because there are just some things. I love working with vendors. I love the projects I did as a vendor. But there are just some things you have to be on the inside to do from the ground up as an embedded resource. And it's funny, I know there's this misconception of state workers. I have never worked harder in my entire life.
I bet. Well, you picked the wrong department.
Yeah,
first
I know.
Of all. This whole emergency 24/7, CAL FIRE, I mean, really, literally on the ground fighting fires every single day. So Yeah, you picked the wrong department
Yeah, I
if you were
did.
looking for like a low key 8 to 5.
Yeah, that would have been nice. But yeah, it's one of the things that drives me though. I think I'm an adrenaline junkie. Like
Yeah,
most of the firefighters, most of the great uniformed personnel I work with, that's what we thrive on. It's the situation, it's the pressure, and it is exhausting, but ultimately like, it's so rewarding. Like knowing that
totally.
like you're part of the solution, and the work you're doing is just having just this direct life and death in some cases
Yep,
impact. It's terrifying, but also like it's very rewarding. And the juice is worth the squeeze if that's like the
yeah.
hard work and everything else. So that's been great, being on the quote unquote inside, and I'm still adapting. I still feel like sometimes I'm a vendor and I've got to get out that mindset, and but I think it's certainly helped me have a different perspective and brought
Totally.
that some of that private sector mentality, if you like, to the state.
Well, I mean, that's one of the things that Cal Fire is actually really great at. Like, we talk a lot on the podcast about, bureaucracy
Right.
and how everything takes so
Hmm.
long and how procurement is broken. And like, I think Cal Fire is really like paving the way for doing things a little more efficiently, operating
Mm,
more like a business
right.
than, your traditional state department.
Yeah, and obviously we had the RFI Squared back in
Yep.
2019, and that's still going strong. We still have the Technosilver, that's been a great partner to us, and the wildfire modeling they've been doing, the common operating platform that they have for all the first responders, has just been fantastic. So that was such a great kickoff to the RFI Squared process. And with this new initiative that we created at Cal Fire to really create this innovation team, it has been kind of like a startup
Hmm.
within the framework that we have to operate within. I mean, that's what I've sort of been pushing for, and have been lucky in a way to have, from the executive level down, to kind of have that, like, this is your framework to operate within, right? And there's not that they've done their very best to try and clear the path for us to do things like MVPs, to do
Yep.
proof of concepts, to do like beta yeah, beta initiatives, right?
Yeah.
Like things that like are traditionally associated with innovation and like change and moving things forward. Been working hard on those, trying to roll those things out. So yeah, I mean, we've tried to run this innovation initiative as a startup. So initially, it's about the low hanging fruit. It's building a brand. It's getting known across the organization, because there were 12,000 people at Cal Fire.
Right.
It is like a fiefdom. It's like a huge
Yeah.
city-sized organization, and it's so diverse. Like the work that we do, I learn more about it every day. I mean, we have canine units, we have arson and bomb investigators, we have environmental scientists, we have obviously all the firefighting staff, we have aviation, we have so many people doing so many diverse jobs, climate scientists. I could go on. And that is a huge department, and even just trying to establish a brand within that department
Yep.
was the first challenge. So you do quick wins, you find the low hanging fruit, you establish credibility. And now the phase that we're in a few years later is, okay, like we've got the business, if you like, how do we make it sustainable? How do we make it so that we're not, to use a cliche, like fishing for everyone? How do we teach more people to fish? How do we
Hmm.
enable them to solve their own problems and move from this quick win, low hanging fruit, like, startup that's building and delivering and going 100 miles an hour? How do we move towards a more transformative initiative over the next phase?
I mean, I think what's really great about that mindset is, we're seeing the importance of that now that AI has kind of exploded, right?
Oh,
Like,
AI, what's that?
right? Weird. I've never heard that.
Yeah.
But, this idea of like incremental building and, delivering early
Hmm.
and proof of concepts
Right.
and like, let's put things in a sandbox. And I'm like,
Yeah.
I'm thinking to myself, like, Cal Fire's been doing this for probably like 5 years now, probably since you started this whole initiative. And it's like, I love to see it. Like, I love to
Mm.
see Cal Fire, everyone's talking about an RFI Squared. And
Yeah.
the governor even had like this big, we're going to do these RFI Squareds for generative AI. And I'm
Yeah.
like, this isn't new. Like, this has been happening at
It's cool.
little old Cal Fire
Yeah.
for a long time now.
Yeah, it's great. And I think obviously the governor's very supportive, and like everything that happened in January, the amount of support we've received from just, again, everybody, right? Like the
Yeah.
partnerships we had, and our vendors stepped up to the plate and working all hours during January, like we all were. And it's just everyone really comes together for that Cal
I bet
Fire.
you that kind of took you by surprise a little bit. Honestly, it took like even the mayor, and like
Yeah,
it
yeah.
took everybody by surprise.
Mhm.
But like, gosh, January is like the time where you guys are supposed to go on vacation because it's
Right.
not busy fire season.
Right. Well, it's funny. Like, yeah, for most folks in Cal Fire, that is probably true. A lot of the work we do outside of the main fire season, though, that even though everyone says it's a fire year, is sort of the fuel reductions projects, right?
Yep.
The prescribed burns and getting ready, because that's when you can really, that's when it's safe to burn. On the IT side, there are really two windows because during the peak of fire season, we try not to change too much, right? We
Yep.
try not to implement brand new systems,
Yeah.
because we have really just two cycles, right? So then everything before fire season is busy preparing for the new things because you got to roll out that new tech, at least internal tech, before the main fire season starts.
Sure.
So, but yeah, January really was a very tough time, and for everybody. And fortunately, we were in a position to help get make sure everything that we could do that was in our control, we could do. We could get the public the information that they wanted as fast as we could possibly do it. We've been working a lot on the website, just trying to meet people where they are, get that information out there. Because the public, with the rise of AI, with the rise of technology and a more tech-savvy populace, people demand things real time now. I mean, we're in the era of, bite-sized information on TikTok, or, people expect even more than ever. I know people have always expected more from government. They always do, right, with technology. But now it's just so ubiquitous and everything's moving so quickly, so it's trying to keep up with that demand. But you talk about the innovation and learning, and I'm a really big fan of the Lean Startup. One of the most interesting books I've ever read, and I don't think I've read it. I've audiobooked it, so my thing is audiobooks. Like,
That's
I don't
fine.
have time to read.
That counts.
Like, I'll go out for a walk, or I'll go sit on the bike and I'll have audiobooks. And the Lean Startup by Eric Ries talks a lot about what are we going to measure? Like, how do we measure success? How are we going to learn? Like, what are the metrics that we're using? And are they the right metrics? So a lot of the things we've been doing and building have been focused around that. And it works, just from things we're doing on the website, how we're capturing user behavior. Was this a good thing? Did this work? Did this not? It's a really good way of driving innovation forward.
Yep.
It's just making sure you're measuring the right things and measuring success. And what is the fastest way? And the mantra I have in my head is like, what is the fastest way I could get business value with technology?
Well, and I mean, that really helps too when you have to go back to the legislature and ask for more money because, we need these new things and we want to deliver. And I mean, it also helps, it's tough for like a DGS to ask for more money because they're looked at as like support functions, back office functions. You're just administrative. It does make it a little easier when you're like, we're literally saving lives.
Right.
Like, who's going to say no to that? That sounds awesome. And then like using technology to just make yourselves even more efficient, which means even more lives saved and, more property saved. And the return on investment there is just like very tangible.
And I think as well, from a climate standpoint, I've seen reports that all of the emissions from wildfires have kind of offset a lot of the gains that we've made as a species, I suppose, in reducing greenhouse gases. And we're part of the Natural Resources Agency for a reason. And a lot of the funding, it's also the long-term future of this planet is suppressing fires, keeping the forests clear and all that fuel reduction effort, but also it's actually a climate problem too, like the wildfires and all the smoke and everything else, and our public health. We talked about the smoke, right? It's a public health thing. So I think it has so many. I mean,
no lasting damage to my kid, but it's still early. Like, who knows, right? Knock on wood.
That was I remember just like the N95s, and there was a time where it was COVID and the fires, so you couldn't go outside anywhere because there was smoke, and you couldn't go inside anywhere because there was COVID. So that was particularly not a fun time.
California.
Yeah, not a fun time to be in Sacramento.
What are you working on right now? And like, what are you thinking over the next, like, what can we expect out of Cal Fire and out of your shop in the next like year or two here?
Well, who knows what the technology is going to be like in the next year or two. That's the real. I mean, even since I joined, in the 3 years since I've joined, there were things I wanted to do on day one that I can now do because the technology wasn't there on day one, and it's staggering. I think the more immediate things that we have planned, we just launched a joincalfire.com website. So one of our we have a new strategic plan. It's called Transforming Tomorrow. You can see that on our website. I was involved in that. It was a great process. It's a really forward-leaning strategic plan. It mentions AI. It's got some really great stuff in there about CAL FIRE's plan. So a lot of our plans are going to be laser focused on that strategic plan. So one of the big things was hiring and retention, like getting employees in, making CAL FIRE an attractive place to work, which it is, by the way. But really getting that and helping folks navigate the state hiring process. So we just launched that website, which is a really good collaboration with our partners, both internal and vendor partners. So that's an exciting thing. A lot of what we're also looking at is, again, like focusing on like getting the information out to the public. So we just launched a chatbot that helps people have a conversation, because I think in a few years' time, there's websites are all going to be conversations. Like everything's going to be about packaging up your data for a Gen AI. It's not going to be about building like your whole user interface. It's going to be about how do we package up our information so that a Gen AI can consume it and have a conversation with whatever, every website will be custom to what the user wants in the future. So we're preparing for that too. A lot of our work is also grounded on, we have this great tool in Gen AI, and I liken it to sort of having a Ferrari, maybe an Aston Martin, not to pick a British car. But I just fine.
No,
Ferrari,
you're California
Lamborghini,
now.
okay,
You're California now.
Yeah, okay, Mustang or So we have this sports car, right, which can do so much and take you anywhere, but we need to. The gasoline is very important when you put in it. And that's the data. And I think a lot of the things that I'm focused on is maybe not as exciting, but it's about getting us ready. It's like getting our data ready, getting the structures and policies in place for us to really turn the key on that Ferrari and use it, right? Like use it properly, make sure people know how to drive, make sure people are trained. So a lot of that is going to be enabling our workforce to use all these tools and be ready for when Gen AI really takes even more of a leap. The other things, we actually have been pioneering 3D maps. So that was one of the things that we've been, again, was kind of a soft launch last year. It was a buried link. We started experimenting because that's another thing.
hard launched during the January fires. I will tell you that. It really exploded, and it was just phenomenal. Yeah,
that was not something, it was all in, a magic word is just beta, right? And actually, or beta, I don't know how to pronounce that.
Yeah, but, it's beta here.
Beta, okay, beta.
But it's adorable. Go for it.
Okay, beta. It's a great word, and I think the public, it's got its own brand. Like people accept that, like, oh, it's going to be a little bit clunky, but they're trying something new, and we've had great receptions to that. But we started doing 3D maps. A great example of lean startup too. It's like the experiments, right? Like everything's like a scientific hypothesis. Like my hypothesis was people have a need for 3D maps. People have an appetite. We use them on the first responder side for many years, like 3D but not so much on the public side. Not so many 3D scenes and other things. All the maps were 2D. So we soft launched. It was like a buried link on each incident. Hey, there's a 3D scene, and no one really, we didn't announce it, but people started clicking on it. And then during January, I think within a week or so, it was 9 million hits on the soft launch. So we're not in soft launch anymore. The appetite is there, and I think being part of that transformation was really cool. And I think the more and more we look into technologies like digital twin, so it's where literally some of these maps are amazing. Like it's almost you can see things happening in real time, like a real model of a city, really accurate building footprints and imagery. We've seen like Google Earth and
then down to like where the fire is within that map, right?
Yeah, and you imagine you add in like the aircraft track. You see the aircraft with the models overhead. You see where the firefighters are. Because one of the things that when I was just Ben the Californian that was worried about fires, right? Before I worked for CAL FIRE, you feel kind of helpless, right? You feel kind of powerless. Like, oh my gosh, the world's ending. Everything's on fire. There's smoke everywhere, and you just at the time I wasn't really seeing anything but negativity. And now the more information we put out there, like, hey, there's the aircraft, we're doing something about it. And now being on the inside, like knowing how much is being done, still that doesn't get, communicated because it's internal traffic and stuff. But you feel better because you're like, the good guys are on the scene, right? Like, the heroes have arrived.
Well, I'm just like imagining even the prediction models of like the wind is blowing this direction. So the map looks like this and the fire is here, but you layer on all of that. And I'm sure there's tons of AI that could go into that too with the modeling of like, it kind of, it's a game changer, even for the firefighters on the ground. Like, you're enabling each of them to be technologists when it comes to combating something like this.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's, you hit the nail on the head there. It's like they know their business. I don't pretend to be a firefighter, right? But, we try and, give them ideas. It's a two-way street. I don't think technology should drive the business, but technology should not also present a blank slate. Like
Sure.
you can't just say, what do you want? Because then the
Yeah.
Ford quote, they want a faster horse. It's like,
Yeah.
well, no, actually there's this thing called cars. And like, what do you really want? You want to be safe, you want to be secure, you want to, put the fire out quickly. So, I see a future where, we've got augmented reality glasses, right? Where firefighters have PPE that they could see through the smoke, they could see the hotspots. I mean, that technology is within reach. And things, of course, the digital twin, LiDAR, which is a really, really cool technology about like just so granular, so deep, like seeing every leaf on a tree. I mean,
That's
that's
incredible.
Also, it's huge data though. It is terabytes and terabytes of data we're talking about for even just like a scan of like, a block. But we are, we're working on that too. These are things that they're slightly slower burners because there's a lot that goes into it. But I see 3D digital twins being super important. How do we get the public to be involved, and how do we, share that with everybody? Because, for me, psychologically speaking, the more I know about what's going into solving a problem, the better I feel. Right?
Yeah.
That you don't feel like everything's on fire and it's horrible.
Literally on fire. Yeah.
Literally.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And figuratively.
Yes.
Well, you mentioned data a little bit, and I want to sort of double click into that. We talk about it a lot here on the show. The state government's data, or government's data in general, frankly, every organization's data is not where it needs to be.
Yeah.
To like use generative AI in a meaningful way today.
Yes.
But I know you guys have been doing a lot of work on data. So what does yours look like? Is there still work to be done? Do you have data governance? Are you working on that? You just hit on it with the LiDAR, like the amounts of data are just like astounding.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think we talk about AI and trust, and the Gen AI in particular is only as good as the data you feed it, right?
Yep.
So if you have 1,000 articles that say the sky is red, guess what? You ask it what the color the sky is, it's going to say red, right? And the same with extrapolating that out to CAL FIRE. If we want to know, hey, where's the best place to do good burns, right? Good acres, like a good fire burns. Like, and if what we traded on isn't quite right, it's going to give us bad advice. So absolutely, it's 100% one of the biggest priorities that I have is data, right? Like, there's a car's no good without the gasoline, right? Or petrol, as I would say, from back in the day. So yes, data is a top priority. And even, I think as a technologist as well, and maybe I think you probably feel this, and a lot of people do, it's overwhelming, right? There's every day it seems like, on LinkedIn is like, there's some new product or like this. And I feel like part of me is like, well, maybe we have to step back and just get back to the basics. Like, what are we trying to achieve with all this? Like, what is the end game? What is the business problem that we are trying to solve? What is the insight that we want to gain, rather than just like being overwhelmed? So whenever I get overwhelmed, which is like pretty much all the time, and it's my baseline, but I take a step back and I'm like, well, what is the business problem? Like, what does this all mean? And even doing things like business analysis, like I think, yes, technologists and programming AI skills are so important. Data scientists, we talk about that, but I actually think like business analysts are super important. Like those people that are in the middle that can say, how do I help the business teams define what they want? Because not every program partner knows what an IT project is. Not every program partner knows what scope control is, or knows what a user story is, or a persona is, all these tools and tricks of the trade. So I personally believe that, yes, there's a lot of talk about data scientists, absolutely, 100%, but business analysts and translating what business wants into utilizing these technologies is super important. But to go back to your original question, data governance, it's absolutely what we're working on. We're building up communities, stewardships, even things like, master data management. We recently did an initiative to just consolidate all of our incident information across the spectrum. We have our dispatch systems, we have national systems, we have aircraft flying overhead. So we're bringing all that together in one place, and that's just rolling up your sleeves, like I've done. Like just it's just you got to get in the trenches. You can't avoid it. You got to do it, and you got to do the messy stuff to get the cool stuff.
Because it is messy. Like I imagine even within a department, because I've been in a department or three, and you have your silos even within your department. You talk about those environmentalists and the firefighters on the ground and the technician, like they probably all have their own stuff. And they're like, this is my business. Like stay out of it, IT. Like we'll call you if we need something. But even just sort of breaking those down, I mean, it's great that you all have a common mission, right?
Yes.
Like you're saving lives.
Yes.
And at the end of the day, you need something like that to sort of drive that enterprise approach.
Yes, yeah, 100%. And I found just I don't know if it's common to all state departments, but I've just found you talk about the mission, like everyone's has that common. Everyone has that in common at Cal
Yep.
Fire. Like everybody,
Yep.
everyone you talk to, it's the mission, and we're all there for that purpose. And I found that just great partnership across the department, just with every program, and I think everyone's very open to change and just looking to the future. I think we all recognize the revolutions that's happening out there, and obviously the situation with California, the wildfires. I think there's just a general feeling across the department that like we all got to come together. We got to advance. We got to in
Yeah.
a safe, secure way. Everything else, but we gotta keep going forward.
So I'll throw something out there. This is a
Sure.
little out of left field, but I've been
Yeah.
thinking a lot about this lately, especially with generative AI.
Mhm.
And, you mentioned business analysts, like that's so important. And I'm like, engineers, that's
Yeah.
so important. I think generative AI and like agentic AI
Yeah. Mhm.
is going to drive us more towards being like full stack professionals.
Right.
Where like,
Mm.
I don't know how to engineer. I'm not an engineer. I'm a project manager,
Right.
but Gen AI can help me be a better engineer.
Right.
Gen AI can do my business analysis for me.
Yeah.
I think which kind of stresses me out in a way because it's like, oh my gosh, I'm going to have to do all of those things. But I think for like, stretch resources, we're super
Yeah.
thin already. We're
Yeah.
asking everyone to do everything.
Yeah.
I think it's going to kind of be a game changer.
Yeah. You're absolutely right. And Gen AI. I mean, even during January, where like we were moving so fast, and we had to do so many things. I didn't have the time to learn. There was some. It was Power BI. Like there was a whole language in Power BI, like DAX,
Yeah.
and I just did not have time to sit through a bunch of training courses. I was
Right.
like, here's my exact problem. Solve it for me. I do not have time.
Yeah.
All the resources and it was super helpful for that. And it helps people, do more, be more productive. But I think innovation these days, I know people who have been on some of my ITLA training courses are probably going to roll their eyes because I say this so much, but I see that innovation is less now about like making new stuff. It's about combining things together. Like what if I combine this data set with this problem, or like these two data sets together, or what if I apply this knowledge to these two things? Like, and Gen AI really helps you mix the soup together,
Totally.
right? And
It's full
experiment.
stack, right?
Yeah,
It's like
you're
combining all
right.
that different
Yeah.
stuff
It's
to
like it's just in time knowledge just in time when you need it. It's that sort of calculator when you need to solve a quick problem. It's there. It's super helpful, especially as a training tool as well.
So I'll ask you a little bit about like the challenges you're encountering. Like what besides like, oh my gosh, the state is going to be on fire.
Yeah.
Like what keeps you up at night? What are you working on, and what are you sort of working to overcome right now?
Yeah, obviously, besides the obvious, what keeps my phone going
Yeah,
off all
literal
the time.
fires,
Yeah,
yes.
that's why we had to silence my
I
notifications, because
know.
every time it goes off, there's
I'm
something.
like, we might want to know if something's
I was like,
happening.
if you see my phone like vibrating consistently, then we probably should just
Yeah.
like take a break. No, it's fine. I think the challenges we have are kind of pervasive to many state departments. It's recruitment and retention. Like how do we get the skills in the public sector, and then how do we plug that gap and find those great partners to help us augment that and fill in those gaps where we can't. And hiring staff, I mean, is always a challenge. Like finding folks with the skills required that want to work for the state, which isn't for everybody. I fully admit I didn't in the beginning, right? It's not for everyone. So I think retention, succession planning as well. That's always a problem. Like how do we remove those like key person dependencies? How do we share knowledge? And actually, Gen AI has the potential to help with that. So the people that we all know, there's people that they've been there forever. They have all that knowledge, right?
Yeah.
How do we, sometimes they're irreplaceable. So how do we help reduce that single person dependency?
Yeah.
How do we get that data out of their head? It sounds painful, but in a nice way. How do we get it out of their head in a way that we could maybe fill in the gaps with Gen AI or other sources? I think it has the potential to help there. I think as well, like what we struggle with, and I talked about it a bit earlier, is just the pace of change, like just the pace of technological change and the voracious appetite from the public, and rightly so, for government to keep up more than ever. And that is a challenge too, especially with the information. When the governor says go on fire to Senator Gov to get the latest information, it's got to be right, and the public don't have, rightly so, they don't have, they shouldn't have to wait. They shouldn't. But then we also have to balance we can't just put anything out there. We can't. We've got to make sure it's vetted, authoritative. So it's again that fine line as well between speed of information that we put out there and accuracy. We're both equally important. So then how do you balance that? That's a challenge. But again, it's with this pace of change. That's why I'm trying to prevent my overwhelmed state and say, like, let's go back to the basics, right? Like what really would transform CAL FIRE and what really would be the business problems that we want to solve. And even now, there are things that, like I was saying earlier, like I couldn't even conceive of how a technology tool could help solve a certain problem. Even things like, sounds silly, but we had a public comment, period for one of our initiatives, and emails of all different sorts of things. So they could be very paragraphs long, right? So how could we then go through and categorize, like tag these as various different tags and categories, and so that we could get some analytics later on, like how many people spoke about X or Y or Z, right? How many people like, and that was all manual, like because there was no. I couldn't train a traditional ML model on it because I didn't have the data set for one. And, we're talking about huge chunks of text. And so Gen AI didn't exist. Now I could just say,
no problem.
Yeah, here are 10 categories of things that is this block of text any one of these categories, and tell me how certain you are of it, and give me your reasoning, right? So that didn't even exist 3 years ago. And I think like us as technologists, I see part of my job is just making sure that I am fully educated so that when I'm talking to program, I can say, actually, you know what, like there is a way we could solve that, right? Like they'll come to me with a business problem, and they did 3 years ago saying, hey, how can we tag these emails like automatically? I'm like, I don't know.
Yeah.
Like, I don't like being beaten.
There's gotta be something.
Yeah,
like,
I was
let
beaten.
me double check.
Yeah, I didn't, we probably could have done a massive like initiative to like create an ML model, but we just didn't have the time or capacity at the time. So I think, it's keeping up with the change, keep like staying on top of like just being educated, which is why I think we talked before the show about like, making more time to go to the CIO Academy and like, these events that are super important, making more time with vendors because, they are working on the cutting edge. So it's having them present to us and educating us, and it's a two-way street, right? So, maybe it's not the right product for us, but hey, that pattern. So I also think innovation is about patterns. The same patterns come up and again, right? Like if a company is putting their best foot forward, there's always something unique about that product. There's always something that they're really good at, right? Or they've solved a problem in a certain way that's, I can bank that and maybe use it for something else, right? So we have these conversations with our vendor partners. And, we give them good feedback, and sometimes it's good. Sometimes, hey, it's not the right fit, but guess what? Like, here's some feedback that somebody else might like. So I definitely think that is one of the challenges I face too, is just how to keep up. Yeah. And, I would like to kind of outsource that to our private partners, right? And work with them to bring the ideas forward to help us navigate this constant barrage of change. Yeah. Right. It's being really focused on CAL FIRE's mission and educating yourself on the strategic plan, all that good stuff. And then, coming to us with relevant solutions. That's super important too.
Well, I mean, you segued perfectly into the next thing that I was going to ask. Yeah. And you're right. And CAL FIRE does a phenomenal job of this. Like the RFI Squared is a perfect example of this. Like you come to the community with a problem. Right. Like, here's our problem. Mm-hmm. Tell us, vendor community, how to solve it. Like the vendor community loves it. Yeah. You guys love it. It's like a win-win all around. Yeah. So like, if people do have these incredible ideas that are going to save lives and change the future, how do you want them to bring it to you? You hit on like, do your homework, right? Which is something we totally preach. It's like, read that plan, look at their budget, look at what they have already bought. But like, how else do you like to receive that information?
Yeah, it's a great question. And, even we have great ideas inside the organization for sure. But if you think about it, statistically speaking, there are more people outside of your organization than there are in it. So in theory, there are better ideas. The more ideas got to come from outside your organization in. So I'm a firm believer in that. So no. I
like that. I'm going to use it in the future.
It's true. Like statistically speaking, there are more people outside my organization than inside. Anyway, so like I'm a firm believer in that. But I think I get a lot of inquiries about like fire technology, right? Like, so, suppressant and things. And we have a whole office dedicated to those specific things. So it was actually created through a Senate bill. Senator Dodd created it. It's called the Office of Wildfire Technology. research and development. And there's a whole board that goes with it that kind of centralize all the kind of very specific wildfire technology. Talking more about the fire science kind of things, right?
Like things that a firefighter is going to use.
Right, exactly.
Okay.
Like the very sort of specific firefighting thing. So we have actually an intake process on our website it was an intake form. Whereas if you've got a new suppressant, you've got things that really relate to fire tech. Like we actually have an intake form, and the office goes through those and curates them. And then there's a whole process, like a factory of like, okay, let's evaluate it, because their whole deal is. The whole raison d'etre, right, is to do emerging tech, evaluate emerging tech to see how it could be applied to specific fire suppression, firefighting.
Yeah.
For our side, on the sort of technology side, the IT side, the traditional IT side that deals with you sort of traditional IT, like your HR systems, your websites, your infrastructure, your cybersecurity, all that stuff, right? Like
things that every department buys.
Yes, things that every department buys. Yeah, I think absolutely. I think work with partners like yourselves to like bring those curated opportunities, and we can have a conversation.
Yep.
I think I'll always do my best to make time. And like I said, I don't think it's a waste. Even if it doesn't work out, let's not make it a waste of anybody's time. Let's we get good ideas. We learn from the vendors putting their best foot forward, and then there's some feedback.
Totally.
Like, like it's not just like we just never call you again, because that is a waste, right? It's like, no, it's like, hey, well, we already have like this product.
You'd be surprised, man. Like
No,
that
I know.
happens. It
I know.
happens all the time.
I know.
So I love that. And like I practice this with my clients too, where I'm like, I'm going to tell you the good, the bad, and the ugly.
Yeah.
Like if this is a flop, I'm going to tell you it's a flop. And
Right.
honestly, like they appreciate that just not as much, but almost as much as
Yeah.
they appreciate like landing a deal with you, because
That's
it's
true.
like, at least we know now. Like,
Yeah.
thank you so much.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and that can help
The
with the next
ghosting
one.
is the worst part.
Yeah, no one likes to be ghosted.
Like, just give me a no.
Yeah, yeah, I agree. And I, because obviously speaking as a vendor, I remember what that's like.
Totally.
Yeah, so I have a little bit with that with me still. I think the other thing as well is like focusing more on, with our mentality is like, what is the POC? Like, how could we actually like, how can we start small and like prove it out?
Yep.
I think less and less we're in the era of a gigantic big bang, like, a massive implementation. It's much more about, hey, I have this new niche, this new emerging product, or I have this new idea. Okay, how do we, ring fence a piece of our infrastructure, do a little pilot, maybe a smaller scope, but we like the idea and we think there's value in like these specific areas. Okay, cool. Let's do a pilot. Let's see how it goes. And again, with the validated learning, with the lean startup philosophy, what are we going to measure? How are we going to measure success? What are the key metrics? And then how are we going to evaluate that? I think that's also really important too, is like maybe have that. I mean, there are some solutions, of course, have to be all or nothing. I get it, right? I totally get it. And there are some transformations that are just big. But for everything else, it's like, well, how do you sort of help us scale it? Like help us, because obviously on the IT side, we have to convince program partners. We have to, we have to get buy-in from, across the organization. So, if you can't just sell to one person, right? It's like you have to, if I like the product, I have to then go and sell it to, I have a great partnership with my chief information security officer, David Lask, right? Like, there's a lot of cybersecurity things. So I'm like, well, I might think it's a good idea, but I got to work with my CISO to make sure it actually is a good. And so it's like help everybody, know what other coalitions that you're gonna have to help people form internally.
I love that too. And it sort of echoes something. You're validating a lot of like my approach to these things. So I appreciate that. But, it's very much like when you go to sell to a department, it's like at least a 3-legged stool, maybe like a 4 or 5, right?
Yeah.
Like you have to sell IT, you have to sell program, you have to sell procurement.
Yeah.
You might have to sell the fiscal shop. Like
it's true.
There's all these different parts of an organization that you're right are super crucial to getting anything past the finish line.
Yeah, but it's not impossible. There is.
It's not impossible.
It's a mountain, but
No.
I think again, if you start small and like with certain limits, like budget limits or whatever, and then like how could we then use that to build momentum? And I think that's also a really interesting approach. But certainly, even if it's just spending time, like I said, having that conversation, having that two-way feedback.
Yep.
How could I use some ideas? Maybe the product isn't right, but maybe there's some ideas that I could apply elsewhere, and vice versa. Maybe it's not a good fit, but hey, have you considered X, Y, Z? Or like, this is why it's not a good fit for us because we have this. Right?
Yeah. But maybe call the feds or call a county or like go to OES because they could use this. Yeah, exactly. Great. It's really good advice. Yeah. All right, Ben, thank you so much.
Yeah,
Any parting words for us here?
Just really appreciate you having me on. And
Thank you.
Just everybody stay safe. Obviously, go to fire.ca.gov for the latest information. And
it's fabulous, by the way.
Thank you.
I sing your praises. You guys have done incredible technology work over there. And
it's been a team effort.
Out.
It's been a team effort for sure. But yeah, just the message is just stay safe, stay healthy, everybody. And let's hope for a not too bad fire year.
Calm fire season.
Crossing
All
everything.
right.
Yeah.
Thank you
so much. Yeah, thank you.